welcome to the Experience Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to feature my recent conversation with Casey Floyd. Casey is Director of Employer Engagement and Recruiting for Darden's Career Development Center, and she and I recently sat down to talk a little bit more about her new career-focused podcast, the recruiting podcast, The Employer Perspective, as well as the work that she does talking with employers about hiring Darden students. Lots of great career information in this podcast. I think you're going to enjoy it. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Casey Floyd. Casey, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Brett. So good to be back.
Okay, so I should say, in the interest of full disclosure, this is your second admissions-related podcast appearance. You were on the Exec MBA podcast when you were just a new podcast trying to make it in this world. We're now 109 or so episodes in with that podcast. We just passed 50 here on the Experience Darden podcast not so long ago, so moving right along.
Wow, that's so impressive.
Well, I will say I'm so excited that you have your own podcast. So we're joking before we got started. This is a podcast about a podcast. A bit like a dream within a dream for all my Inception fans out there. So you have a new podcast. It is called
the Recruiting Podcast, The Employer Perspective.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about how this podcast came to be. I know you have a few episodes out in the world. How many episodes or so have you recorded at this point? I should say we're recording this podcast in mid-February or so.
Yes. So that's a funny question. All of the podcasts that you have recorded, I aspire to have that many. I have officially launched 2, and I want to say we have recorded about 6. So we're working toward it, and I've got many more ideas lined up to kind of hit the ground running for 2020.
Awesome. So what was the inspiration for the podcast? Where did the idea come from?
Great question. So actually, when you started the Missions podcast, and I was like, wow, that's very interesting. And of course, listening to a couple podcasts myself, it's like, this could be an interesting way to reach students, mainly current students, but potentially prospective students. In general, I've always had this feeling too that everyone likes to hear is what they say from the horse's mouth, right? Like, hear from that person on what things exist. And so as students kind of go into this recruiting landscape, there's so many questions to be answered. And I think sometimes just hearing from the employer themselves on what their perspective is around various topics really kind of helps emphasize or reiterate maybe what we're saying in the Career Center here at Darden, what I'm saying from my experience as an employer before Darden. So, anyway, I think it's just a great way, another voice to help students in recruiting.
So how do you identify the employers you want to have on your podcast?
So we have so many great employers that come to Darden. So it's kind of easy to kind of go, hey, who all is coming? Who's been here? Who's super engaged? Those relationships that I've created and or the school's created over a period of time, reaching out. And sometimes it's an alum that's a key recruiting contact for the company. Sometimes it is an actual HR recruiter. And they're really excited to kind of have a conversation, and it's fun.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Are they comfortable talking about, this is what we're looking for, what we're thinking about when we're looking to hire people?
Yeah, well, it is kind of funny. Sometimes people get, and of course, being put on a mic, you get a little nervous even if you talk about it all the time. But for the most part, everyone's really comfortable. Once you get into the conversation, it flows. Want to have fun with it and just, again, make it easy. It's nothing too crazy or detailed. So for the most part, everyone's okay with it.
Yeah, so let's talk about your role a little bit more. We're going to come back to the podcast. We're not done with the podcast. So what do you do for the career team?
Yeah, so I'm in a very unique role. Spent many time as leading the employer team. So working with about 120 employers with a great team of employer relations managers, really helping companies engage with Darden to recruit students. I've also been able and very fortunate to work with our residential population from a career coaching standpoint, mainly focused in general management and marketing, but just general recruiting. interview prep, mock behaviorals, resume reviews, cover letter reviews, you name it, down to, hey, how do I find someone that doesn't come to Darden to recruit? And so very fortunate to have been in the Career Center in doing these roles. It's just very rewarding.
So you meet with employers all the time about hiring Darden students. What's your pitch to them? If they haven't ever hired Darden students, you say, when you hire a Darden student, this is the kind of person you get.
Yeah, great question, Brett. You're just getting a very well-rounded individual. Darden and our general management curriculum and our core that we're known for, you're really getting someone that is going to think about business in its entirety across the enterprise and all the functions. And I think that is something that you may not necessarily get when you're specializing in one area, which we can do that here too. But also just a humble, very dedicated, diligent, and passionate person in the workforce. And I think that's something that is unique to Darden.
Yeah, and it seems like there's a lot of paths out of Darden. We talked about this on the podcast through current student interviews. But the one thing that has been important to me, at least, as prospective students listen to these conversations, is that they don't feel like everybody has to go in a particular path. You don't have to be a consultant. You don't have to work in finance or tech. Really, there are so many different ways you can go. Again, it's a general management curriculum. It's very broad.
Yes, it is. And I think that's what makes the day and the life of my job so amazing, because I get to talk to so many different students with so many different interest and ideas of what their career, what they want it to look like, right? So whether it's that person that comes in and is really wanting to go into the energy space and something very nuanced and niche, working with them just kind of an accountability partner and making sure and helping them cultivate those relationships to find that career. To someone that wants to do the mainstream MBA route like consulting or banking. But we send people into all industries and all functions, and that's what's exciting and keeps it different. So
do you feel, you've been having conversations with employers for a number of years at this point. Do you feel like what they're looking for is evolving, is changing in interesting ways or that you might think would be of interest to our listeners?
Yeah, no, I think careers and industries evolve daily, right? And it's really being able to keep up with that. It's, technology is advancing in so many ways and disrupting every industry. So kind of being on the forefront of that, I always think is critical, whether it's the big data or AI or just the hot topics. Table stakes, right? But at the same time, just general EQ and leadership and communication, those are all key traits that won't go away, but are still super uber important, that the other technology related things don't necessarily always overshine. And so knowing how to have that nice mix and keeping yourself fresh, I think is top of mind every day.
Well, one of the things that's been interesting to me as people have these conversations about the future of work, there's sometimes this conversation around what the machines will do, which will typically be data, any sort of calculations, formulas, all this kind of stuff, and what will be left for people to do.
Right.
And that will be management, leadership, all the EQ interpersonal stuff.
Yes.
And I think Darden students uniquely well situated to sort of lead in that EQ space because of all the collaboration that happens here, whether you think about the case method, learning team, just the social dynamic of being a member of what's a relatively small MBA community, 335 or so students per class. You got the sections, obviously a lot of section pride here. So how do you think about that?
I think that's 100% true. And even employers that I talk to, they can teach skills, right? Most people can teach skills, and those skills are always changing as we talk about. But just the interpersonal piece of it, again, the communication, the leadership, how you engage with each other, is so important and not necessarily always taught, right? How you work in teams, and you're right. I think that's where we have a unique proposition at Darden, that we do have such a team-oriented community, and people thrive in that environment when they leave Darden. And again, you can learn skills.
That's right, and you're sort of continuously learning, right?
Yeah.
There's no doubt that people go forth from here with this sort of learning orientation, right?
Absolutely.
This is what you have done here. Obviously, I think the students who thrive here are those students who really have a passion for learning, a sort of innate curiosity. They like reading, they like discussing. Hopefully that continues to be present in their work life. We would fully expect it to be. So as you think about this podcast that you now have, that is designed for current students and learning more about sort of the interview process or how these employers are thinking about finding candidates for the roles that they're hiring for. How do you see this fit into the suite of offerings? You talked about all the things that the career team does to support students. How do you see this fitting into that sort of suite?
Yeah, I think it's a complement to all the activities that we do in the Career Center, whether it's we host employers here, the personalized advising and coaching that we do. It is just a complement of all of that. And kind of like I was mentioning, it kind of reinforces a lot of the tools that we're teaching the students from a recruiting perspective. But at the same time, I want it to be relevant based on the timeline of where we are in a recruiting process. So I know I mentioned 2 have launched. It was right before interviews kicked off in January for our first year students. So hearing from 2 companies' perspectives of what's important in the interview was timely. So kind of want to keep in this timely manner. So upcoming, you may hear something about how to be successful in your internship because summer is coming upon us. Since it's February, it'll be here before you know it. But really just hearing, again, from that employer of, what is important in the interview? What does networking truly mean? Are you keeping score? How do you consider me after the interview? Again, the insider look at what the process is. Because when you're at Darden, it's kind of scary to go through this whole recruiting wheel or machine, as we call it. But hearing that perspective from an employer side, I think sometimes takes a little bit of the pressure off. From students.
Yeah, I think that first year, one of the pleasant sort of lessons that has come through in our conversations, particularly with second-year students, and I try to underscore this in our admissions conversations, is recruiting is a 2-year process.
It is.
So let's all just remember that you are in an MBA program for 2 years.
Yes.
And, this re-recruiting, which even that is sort of a problematic terminology because, that's just a continuation of recruiting. Yeah. Some people do their summer internship and they say, hey, this isn't exactly what I want to do, or maybe I just want to explore what else is out there. A lot of the second years have said, look, the internship is just information.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity for you to evaluate a potential step. It is not the end-all, be-all to your career process. And your first-year recruitment process is not the end-all, be-all.
Absolutely. That's so true. I think about it as, this 10-week interview, right? From an employer side, it's a 10-week interview. From a student, it's a 10-week interview. You get to kind of see, you get to date for 10 weeks, maybe 12, and see if you like it. It's also just a way, maybe you came in with a non-traditional background, and we have a lot of students do that. It's a way to go out and kind of cut your teeth at something new, learn a new skill, be able to come back, update your resume with something that you hadn't done before that's more attractive because maybe you want to go and take a left and do something different. So again, you're so right. It is a 2-year process. It's really just taking this whole 2-year experience and really making it something so you can go do what you want after Darden.
Yeah, I was just relieved to hear students actually articulate that because I think about our first year students. Obviously, like I said, we were recording this in February. This is a very busy time.
Yes, and stressful.
They've got a lot going on. I think they obviously feel pretty settled as students at this point. There is a learning curve with being a student here at Darden. The case method certainly get a lot thrown at you pretty early in the process. You're having to lean on your learning team. And then, of course, you got company briefings and a lot of the research process, sort of self-reflection process, self-assessment process that goes into the career stuff earlier on. And then now you're really kind of working through that application and interview phase. That's a lot.
Yeah, it is. And, one of the things I'm realizing now is we talk so much about the whole process leading up to this interview. Well, now students have interviewed and it's like, well, what happens? Wait, I got to wait. Is there a second round? Did I get it? Did I not? So it's just the anxiety of whoa. We don't talk about that very much too, but also it's kind of taking a step away, right? Yeah. When you're not at Darden, you do this career, you may want to change jobs. You're going to apply, you're going to interview. It's going to take some time to hear back. So It's also helping folks navigate that kind of ambiguity with like, what's my summer going to look like?
No, that's right. And I think, obviously these interviews occur at different times.
Yeah.
We talked with students here on the podcast. For people who want to do something, I just had Robin Swift on the podcast, and she talks with a lot of students who kind of want to move into that sort of entrepreneurial, small startup, maybe not big tech, but sort of smaller tech. That process is later and more ambiguous, and a lot of your classmates may already have something by the time that you're getting around to interviewing, and so to be comfortable with that, to kind of know that you're running your own race. I think we hear that often here on the podcast, run your own race, focus on what you want to do, try to block the other stuff out, because everybody has their own path here.
You are, you just can't elaborate that enough. I feel like I have that conversation every day around put the blinders on. Right? This is your career as an individual. It's not anybody else's. Of course, celebrate your friends' successes, but just be you and kind of go after what you want and, stick to it and you'll be successful. And that is hard to do in this environment, but.
Well, I just think it's the nature. I mean, you obviously have the students who come here are looking to switch careers, right? So pretty much on the same path. They're looking for a job, and people are getting jobs at different times depending on their sort of target industry or target employer. So that's challenging. And also, let's just talk about all the opportunity, right? Yes. I mean, you show up first day of class, and pretty soon thereafter, you've got companies coming to talk to you about
probably
this.
Within about 3 weeks.
Yeah, so it can be overwhelming. Just the number of things you could potentially do. And so I've been so impressed with the career team in terms of all the pre-matriculation support that's provided for students now. So you want to talk a little bit about that too, CDY and some of the great things?
So the team has been fantastic in designing, as you mentioned, a pre-matriculation program that will really allow you to do some of those early assessment tools, really do some self-reflection before you come and start the MBA, even do a couple of the tactical things. Get your resume in the Darden format because when you do arrive, it's fast and furious. And so the more you can kind of be ready, the better off you will be and kind of take a little bit of that pressure and oh my goodness, getting used to the environment at Darden away. But also, through those self-reflection moments and even that time to explore some over the summer is very valuable. If you don't know what brand management means, reach out to an alum, do some investigative work, or you really don't know what day in the life of a consultant works. It's okay. There are definitely people that you can talk to within our network and our community. And we're happy to kind of connect you to have those conversations because at least a little bit more of a direction that you have coming in, it'll seem a little easier, but not to worry. We will put as many employers as we can in front of you so that you can have those conversations as well when you do get to Darden and kind of find the path that fits you.
And we tell admitted students all the time, once you know you're coming to Darden, take full advantage of all the meetups and events that you can go to, meet all the alumni you can, just not only get to know your classmates, but get to know people potentially in your target industry or target market.
Yeah.
Build those relationships now. You have a lot of access as an incoming Darden student. It's a particularly warm introduction. I think alumni are always eager to talk about their time in Charlottesville and, oh my gosh, how exciting. We're getting ready to do this. So take full advantage of that. One of the things that I think is interesting from an admission standpoint is we get a lot of questions about on-grounds recruiting. And what we always tell students, and I'm so interested in your perspective on this, is only so many employers can come on grounds. Right? There's a finite amount of space.
Right.
So this is only one channel.
Absolutely. I'm actually glad you brought that up because, yes, on grounds, and it just seems easy, right? It's just kind of right there in front of you. But the world of MBA opportunity is massive, right? And of course, we can't fit everybody at Darden, and they all can't come to Charlottesville. And it's also, kind of taking the employer perspective on that too. Maybe it's a company that only hires 2 to 4 MBAs, right? So they're not going to spend the money to fly all over the country to go to different schools. And so their recruiting strategy is just very different and doesn't fit a campus strategy. But the good thing is that our Career Center has connections with companies like that as well, and it goes well beyond who comes on grounds, that we can connect students in ways that is super helpful so they can have an off-campus strategy as well. And we do recommend having a little bit of both so that way you can really understand what opportunities exist. And then we want to educate you on what are those timelines, right? On grounds happens in this time. As you mentioned, startup is a little bit later, but really being able to help you navigate that is one of the resources that we do provide. But yeah, on grounds seems very easy. and I will tell you, it's definitely not the real world, right? It's the special thing that you get to take a part of as an MBA student. And so that's where it's kind of a real gem, but it's not the one and only thing.
Yeah, and I do think it's the natural thing to focus on because, again, it seems like a captive audience, so to speak, of employers that are coming here expressly to interview Darden students, obviously going to other schools too. But, as someone who talks to employers, you seem to have an interesting perspective on this because you're likely having the conversation with them. Do you want to come on grounds? Do you want to, do off grounds recruiting? Really talking about some of these mechanisms with them.
Yeah. And that's the thing that we definitely want to do, especially with employers, right? Because they want to come and recruit from Darden because we have such top talent. And part of those conversations is how can we help you recruit that talent in the best and most efficient way possible for the employer, right? And so, as I mentioned, it may make sense for them to come to campus because that's the way they like to engage, but maybe they don't have the resources or the bandwidth to be able to do that. So we do offer virtual capabilities, which is fantastic. We have some great classrooms where we can just pipe them in virtually, and you can still kind of engage with them through the cameras and the microphones and hear all about their MBA opportunities to just a posting network and alumni network. And that's where we talk about how do you reach those folks and how do you have those conversations to get in. But yeah, we just make sure that we can work with employers to best fit their needs because the more we can do that, the more opportunity we get to provide those students.
So you've got a podcast. You're getting started. It sounds super helpful.
Got a long way to go to catch up to you.
No. Listen. I'm a huge fan of podcasts. I mean, I do think people sometimes wonder how we reach peak podcasts, but I think we found it helpful from an admissions standpoint to have these conversations so people can experience the community, get a feel for the culture. We can answer questions that we get all the time. Yeah. And it sort of debunks some myths about, business school and job search and, who's here, what kind of background you have, all these kinds of things that a tendency seems to be as we talk with prospective students, and I'm very interested in your thoughts on this, that, maybe I don't have the right background. I've never taken X class. I haven't worked in a traditional business setting. You talk to the employers and, you think about the people who are here at Darden. We're a general management program. We have a lot of different kinds of people in the classroom, very intentionally. So, as we think about putting the class together, what do employers say about that kind of thing?
Oh, they want a diversity of background. That's kind of part of, their diversity goals. They don't want to hire the same people with the same background all the time, which is super valuable. You hear the big tech firms saying you don't have to have a tech background, right? It's not a requirement. Just so fortunate to have worked, a student yesterday in my office was a teacher, a teacher that is going to Microsoft. So it's just exciting to see people that come in that have a career goal and objective. And again, that's what we do in the Career Center. We help you craft that story. No matter what you do and what background you have a skill set that you can translate into something different. And we work with you to tell that story. And that's what employers want, just to have some tie and connection that you can come in and do the job. So yes, you can do whatever you set your mind to, Brett, I think. And that's the fortunate thing when you come to Darden, that we set you up for success with that. And just a little foreshadowing, there might be a little bit of a podcast on the employer perspective of a non-traditional student and where they are today and how they got there through the recruiting process.
Oh, wow. Spoiler alert. We don't normally get to break news here on the Experienced Darden podcast, but, always happen, stay tuned, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's all great points. So interesting to hear you talk about it as a storytelling exercise. How are you telling your story about your skills and background and your fit for a potential role or position? On the admission side, perhaps no surprise to you, it's also about storytelling, right? What you've done educationally, career-wise, why you want to pursue an MBA. MBA, why you want to come here to Darden specifically, what about this program and experience resonates with you, and then what are your career goals? And we're looking for sort of linearity of thought. We're looking for some reality testing of these steps. I think we had we had a student here on the podcast earlier who was talking about the sort of why. And I realize that's kind of a Darden thing to sort of talk about your why. It's certainly part of our marketing message. But from an admission standpoint, those are the most insightful moments of anyone's story. I did this because, or I made this choice, or I want to do this because. That sort of why reflection so that we understand your motivations and sort of what is leading you to this step. That's where we truly learn about someone. I imagine employers are also interested in that sort of thing.
Well, it's so funny that you talk about the whys and yes, kind of the background for Darden marketing a little bit, but it is so unbelievably important, Brett, the why. I haven't been able to coach that enough, I think, this year throughout. When an employer, you walk in to interview with an employer, they ask you why this company, fill in the blank there. They really want to know the so what, why you. It go beyond the surface level that, you're a top organization and, you're doing this or you're doing that. No, why do you want to work here, right? What's the because? What's the so what? And so really diving deep. And so employers want to know that too, because that's how they find that cultural connection and fit beyond all the other interview questions that you will get. But the whys are very, very important, I think, in general.
So I'm always really impressed with our second-year students on the podcast. Not to say I'm not impressed with our first year. I'm impressed with all of our students. But the second-year students seem to be so sharp in terms of how they tell their story. And I was reflecting on that the other day, and I'm like, oh, it totally makes sense. How many interviews have people done? How many mock interviews have people done to get ready for this? And I wonder if you see a learning curve for students in being able to articulate their brand or their value or the sort of why you should hire me for this role.
Yes, definitely. And I think that's, again, when I talk about this job being so rewarding, it's almost, I used to be a sports coach in volleyball. And it's kind of the same thing. You get to start with someone and you get to help them navigate and you get to see that improvement over a period of time. And that's what's really exciting. So yeah, you have someone come in, they tell you their story. Maybe you ask them about why, because why company you're recruiting with, and you hear it and you're like, well, let's talk about that. And, naturally you just start asking them some questions, pose the whys back to them, dig a little deeper. And next thing you know, you might be whiteboarding and really bringing out their story and who they are, and making it very unique to them. Again, you have 300 plus classmates, right? And several of them might be going and interviewing and recruiting with the same company. You have to differentiate yourself. And a part of that is bringing who you are into those stories. So yeah, it's really great. It's just really gratifying to watch someone go from point A to point B, and then of course land a job or land an internship. So yeah, the second years are really good because they've been practicing.
No doubt. And I'm so interested by the intersection of what you're talking about and what we share with prospective students from an admissions standpoint, because oftentimes students will think, okay, well, there are a lot of people from my company who may be looking at your MBA program, or there are a lot of people from my particular background, or maybe I'm very different than the type of candidate you see, maybe in terms of my edge, or at least my perception is that I'm very, very different. And feeling like, oh man, maybe this is somehow a hindrance to their candidacy. And what we stress with every student is you are all unique in ways that you perhaps don't even realize. But when you start telling your story and we are listening to the things that you're sharing, there will be lots of difference that comes out over the course of that conversation. And I think one of the reasons why we have the admissions approach that we do, sort of very much around sort of narrative and the holistic understanding of someone's application, and obviously the interview approach that we do, which is very conversational and very much about the applicant telling his or her story, it allows us to really understand who this person is individually, not just what they've done, not just what they've done educationally, professionally, their skills background, but the sort of broader context of who they will be here.
Yes. And I feel like almost the classroom, because of that work that you all do, almost mirrors the job, right? I mean, everyone's different that you work with. Everyone has a different background. And there's just so much out there now about bringing your whole self to work or, feeling like you find that cultural fit. That's what that is, right? Is being able to showcase who you are and how you do things and how you like to work and how do you thrive, right?
So, you're going to continue to plug your podcast here on this podcast. I think everybody should listen to it, current and prospective students. What have been a few of your favorite surprises so far? You've started having some of these conversations. I imagine you have a similar experience to me. I learn new things all the time. I'm like, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Wow, it's a really interesting way to think about that. Whatever the case may be. Some surprises that you've encountered along the way?
Maybe more surprises for myself, because this isn't necessarily the most comfortable. You know, the first one recording, I'm like, oh, it almost felt like you're standing public speaking in front of 300 people, but you're actually like in a studio. How the nerves can still be the same. Sure. But more of just how to make it conversational and just have fun with it. And I think that's what is also a learning, that the more fun you can have, right, in anything, it becomes enjoyable to do. But then also just, hearing from the employers and kind of just, again, that reiteration of what we talk about, the reinforcement of what we do, just kind of makes you feel good when you leave and you're like, well, I'm not telling them the wrong thing. Just staying fresh. And I think that's what's exciting for the most part. But you never know what someone's going to say in that flowing moment. So keeping it on your toes.
That's right. That's right. And I do think you make a great point. I think one of the reasons why we're such fans of the podcast is students sit here in the studio and they say what they say. Yeah. There's an authenticity in that. And it's not to say that the blog posts that we run or the other news stories that we run are not authentic, but I do think people tend to think they're a little closer to the source with the podcast format and audio format. And I'm a huge fan of the fact that it is largely a passive medium, right? You can take a walk, you can sit on a metro, sit in traffic, any number of things, and still learn something.
Absolutely.
At the same time.
And that's the other thing too, especially from a student perspective, we know we throw career content at you in different ways. You're sitting in class all day, you're reading cases. So, one of the other pieces for the employer perspective is just, hey, how can I get, 10 to 20 minutes worth of content to you pretty quick and easy that you can listen to it whenever, and however you want to, depending on where you are in your recruiting cycle. So, hopefully it's just making it simple.
Yeah, that's always the goal. So just a little bit of a historical note, I guess. When you started reaching out to employers about this, we talked a little bit about our employers open to the conversation. Were employers saying, oh, we hear about this kind of thing a lot from other schools, this relatively novel idea? I'm curious about how this fits into the broader marketplace.
Yeah, no response like that. So I feel like this is one of the first. I've had a couple schools reach out just to have a conversation on, hey, is that working? Or, what are you learning? I'm like, well, again, I'm not 100 in, so still learning. But I think it's just a new way to approach content and get it to students. So yeah, no, it's definitely not out there. Employers are definitely, interesting. Some may have to ask if they can do approval, and again, it just depends on the person from my perspective. Is it recruiter and are they talking about the company? Is that okay? Or is it an alum that's kind of a point person that's kind of giving more of their personal alumni perspective into recruiting? So we have to navigate that a little bit. I have had a guest that had to be completely confidential, company and names, but we had fun with that. So we make it work.
Well, I think about this just as part of the information gathering that all students are doing, right? So we talk about sort of the communities that students tap into when going through the job process. So you have career coaches who are, second-year students who are there to sort of work with first-year students. You have perhaps second-year students that interned at your target companies that you can talk to. You have clubs and organizations that might be aligned around your industry or career interests. You have alumni at these companies, also maybe people from your own personal or professional networks at your target companies. So many people to potentially talk to. And I think students do a lot of that networking. People tend to focus on sort of these mechanisms on grounds, off grounds, recruiting. But in the background of all of that is a tremendous amount of networking and relationship development.
Yes. And it's funny when you say the word networking, people freeze up. It's such a bad word. But it's what you do, right? You just have conversations and you kind of find out about one another. And then you have that aha moment of, you used to do that? Well, that's what I want to do. Tell me more. And it's all under the premise of networking. And I try to take that networking term away and just say, just go have a conversation, go make a new friend. And that's what it's about, right? A sustainable relationship that you can kind of utilize, benefits for both parties. And so, yeah, it's all about that. And it's funny, even when I do talk to some students, I'm like, hey, did you know this student in section, E did this before they came in? Oh, no, I didn't know that. So even those people around you in the classroom may have come from, ESPN, and you want to go into media. You just never know. So again, conversations are great to have anywhere and everywhere.
Yeah, we just had a conversation with Jim Collins and Sarita Schultz, two of your career colleagues who work with our executive MBA students on the Exec MBA podcast. And over 45 minutes or so, we went through the phases of a job search, right? Mm-hmm. Recognizing that new year, new you, sometimes people are thinking about making a career transition. So it's an opportunity to talk about how people do make a career change, how we encourage students to think about that process, some of the resources that are here that we make available to students. And we talked about networking and how it has this sort of negative connotation. And I think a lot of that is born out of the fact that people think of it as a transactional thing, right? I wouldn't be talking to this person but for my particular interest in their employer or their career path. And doesn't that make it like a little icky?
Yeah.
And I think that's one way to look at it. Mm-hmm. I would encourage people to think about it slightly differently, that you're really just curious about learning about that person. One of your former career colleagues used to talk about it as just being curious. Mm-hmm. You're coming at it from an informational learning. It's an informational sort of learning approach. It is not transactional. You're going to ideally maintain that relationship as you move forward through the process. And of course, not everybody's going to respond to your outreach. At Darden, we have an incredible alumni group and incredible students who are eager to help. But even still, I mean, not all outreach is responded to. I think there's always some surprises along the way. Like, oh man, I didn't expect to hear from that person. But you have a lot of people here to support you, but it's not transactional.
It is not. It is not. The best relationships and the best networks are not transactional. And yes, I think in the given moment when you feel like you have to network to get the job, that's what it feels like. But Brett, I think you make a great point, is if you're just looking at it as, I need to get some information, I need to learn something, I want to get to know this person. Because the other thing is, that person doing the job, is it similar to you? Like, what is that working environment? Are you able to thrive? So there's a lot of information that you get out of having these conversations. And the next thing you know, you've got somebody that's an advocate. You built a relationship. Maybe you connect back with them in 6 months because you want to come back. You just never know. But yeah, that's, again, another great thing about the Darden community. Everybody, for the most part, is willing to have that conversation and help you learn and navigate.
Yeah, and conversations lead to more conversations, lead to more conversations. So this sort of the way that it metastasizes as you move through this process. So it takes on a certain momentum. So quick plug one more time. What's the name of your podcast?
It is the Recruiting Podcast, The Employer Perspective.
All right. And where can people find it?
So it is on Darden's website.
Okay.
For our podcast, where we keep all our podcasts. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I share them there as well.
Oh, nice. All right. So wall-to-wall media
here.
So Casey, we typically end with a piece of advice or a tip. You may have some people who are incoming Darden students or, thinking about going through that. Just wondering about, okay, got a lot ahead of me. I'm going to be looking to make a career change. What's a piece of advice you would share with the prospective MBA students of the world? Yeah,
maybe a couple. And we've kind of touched on them, but I think to reinforce some of our conversation is to really just do that soul searching. What do you love to do? What do you see yourself doing? Really understand the environments in which you do thrive, as I talked about that, and kind of do some research, have conversations, do some pre-networking. Understanding before you come in is my number one recommendation. And number two, know, and if you do know what you want, stick to it. It is your plan, it's your career, and it's no one else's. And I do think when you arrive on the scene, all of a sudden it gets real exciting and you're like, wow, that person's having those conversations and that company looks fantastic. So there's a lot of diamonds out there shining bright that you want to, but stick true to you. I think is, again, probably my second number one. Stay true to you.
That's right. 1A, 1B.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, Casey, it's always a pleasure having you on the podcast. I'm so excited about your recruiting podcast. That is fantastic. I think it's helpful for current students and prospective students. Obviously, we're podcast partial here on the Experienced Darden podcast, but excited about what you're doing and look forward to tuning in.
Awesome. Thanks, Brett, for having me again.
And that was my conversation with Casey Floyd, Director of Employer Engagement and Recruiting here at the University of Virginia Darden School of Business. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, at virginia.edu. And until next time, thanks for listening.